Alright, time for another DraftScience video presentation. Continuing, with the subject of kinetic energy versus momentum as a description of, it should be in here somewhere about what this stuff was originally called, but it doesn't really matter. The quality of motion, So, to simply point out the controversy, and apparently this is completely, for all of you, it seems completely intuitive to believe that if I throw something like a baseball, and then I just simply make the baseball, twice as heavy or half as heavy, that somehow I imparted on the lighter object, because it will go faster, higher speed, I imparted on it some kind of extra energy, something special that I couldn't impart on the heavier object. That there is no proportionality between its size and its impact. That if an asteroid is coming at us and the asteroid is twice as big, but moving half as fast, somehow it has so much less energy, than if it's, half the size and moving twice as fast. And even though you can kind of know when you throw something, twice as heavy, that it's twice. It's not 4 times as hard to throw, it's twice as hard to throw, right? And then also that if you throw it into gravity, the lighter object will go much higher. But when it hits your hand, it's going to have the same impact if you threw it with exactly the same energy. That one of them doesn't have more energy, more anything special. That there's no special quality that is given to lighter things because you're able to move lighter things faster. And like I said, in every way it should be kind of, in my opinion, to me, the intuition is, the logic is, no, there's nothing special. Twice as heavy, half as slow, able to throw it, but the impact in the catcher's mitt will be the same. So if I have a bowling ball, for example, and I have an 8-pound bowling ball versus a 16-pound bowling ball, I can understand I can throw the 8-pound one twice as fast, maybe, but the heavy one I can throw it much slower, but it has so much more momentum, that it'll be able to hit pins without being disturbed as much. It'll be able to, all the energy will be the same in the end. Whether I throw the 8-pound ball twice as fast or I throw the 16-pound ball half as fast, that I'll end up with the same. And that the real figuring comes into, well, why do people use heavier ones? Right? The lighter one has much more energy. By the kinetic energy formula, when you throw the light one twice as fast, it has a lot more energy, twice as much energy, as the slow one that's twice as heavy. So they believe it's twice as much energy. Yet why do professional bowlers choose to use the heavier ball? Well, you could argue because it's a little more stable when they throw it, so they're less likely to throw it crookedy. And that the slow one maybe gives the ball time, to hook, and they can use that extra time to hook to get a better angle at the pins. But I mean, why are they, are those really good enough to make up for the fact that the lighter ball has twice as much energy? Twice as much? It doesn't seem like that would be logical, so you can sort of understand it. No, they got the same energy, and they're choosing the heavier ball because there is an advantage. That you can get, it is more. You're more likely to throw an accurate shot when the object is a little heavier. When something's really light, it's harder to throw it accurately, just because you don't have as many sense. You don't get as much sense data, from your throwing arm. So there's an optimum amount of weight for throwing. See, look, physics is a little complicated. You got to think about through all these things. But I'm just saying, the basic intuition is, you've got to know that if I have a spring and I shoot 2 things into the air, and I put a light one on and half as much and twice as heavy, and the same exact energy. So what? The light one goes further. That's just logical. Yes, of course it's going to go further. It's gravity. But they're going to land with the same energy, the same thing you put into them. So how could they magically have different energies when they're traveling through the course of the action? Why would you think they have different amounts of energy when they're going to land with the same energy? What's on this side of the pendulum is the same as that side. Now, if I can change what's on the side of the pendulum, you kind of know the thing going, the light thing going twice as 4 times higher doesn't mean it has more energy. It just means it's able to get through gravity easier. You got to be able to understand this. Like missiles, when they shoot them, rockets, the big one takes, it can't, it has to push through gravity. It takes a lot more work for it to get through a little bit of gravity because it's of its mass. And the little one just shoots right through it because it doesn't hit as much gravity. It's the simple answer. Well, anyway, so apparently this is an outrage. To question the logic of this magical energy that no one's ever captured, and that it just can't make any sense logically. You really think the light bowling ball has 4 times the energy? Twice as much. Yeah, what can I say? Wrong. Just wrong. So anyway, I did find another paper by another guy who's totally unknown. Anyway, saying exactly what I've been saying, pretty much. There's a couple of little revisions. Maybe we'll read some of it. But, basically just pointing out, this is a really bad history. This formula doesn't have any integrity. It really shouldn't be used. It's bad physics. And apparently completely uncounter-argued in any kind of rational way, as far as I can tell. So, that's what we're stuck with. There's been a few people in the course of, human events that have noticed this kind of glaring weirdness in physics, and but nobody will address it, and there seems very little interest in revisiting a subject that really needs to be revisited. It is... Come on, it's almost just a superstition, frankly. Kinetic energy theorem, superstition. Glaringly bad. So another guy had linked to this paper as a counter to the other guy's paper, which is one of these pompous douchebags telling everybody that you can't possibly do physics, and only physicists can do physics, and they only can do it as a group based on consensus because blah, blah, blah. There's no such thing as physics superheroes, even though physics is just littered with them, right? Einstein got to write an awful lot of what's in the physics books. And the funny part is his early work is written into the books, but his later work is pretty much ignored because his later work has the context of, I don't know if we really are on the right track. And nobody wanted to hear that. And again, they just turn this all into some personal thing. You're all after ego points, and you're doing this, and you're doing that, and blah, 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 blah. And yes, there's lots of tinfoil hatters out there, lots of conspiracy theorists, okay, who don't want to bother doing any of the work, and blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't give you any right to do these generalizations, this profiling, that anybody who objects to your standard politics or your standard anything is somehow worthy of automatic ridicule. They don't even have to say anything. Just because they're fighting your little silly Borg, your little clip art Borg. Your argument through clip art. Just, not very useful. All right. So in the middle of all, the nonsense, there is this very nice comment. Jason, your physics videos are very compelling, but was particularly eloquent. I like that. You just keep getting better at communicating physics. Well, I am getting calmer. I'm just not taking it as personally as I did before. Some of the best content I've encountered on the subject and in general on YouTube. And clearly with context. The more pieces of this thing I see that are broken, the more I understand how the broken pieces are connected and why it's all broken. But it's, this really is just bandwagonism. All of it is just a club. All right, they're speaking their little special languages. It's just a club, and it's not a good way to. Again, the debates were superficial. They don't really mean anything. Everybody it's all just jump on the bandwagon. We've done enough work. Let's just go with this as a fact. And that happened with the Big Bang and the redshift thing and all. You can go with Einstein's theory, right? That the Eddington experiment never repeated. That's just a bandwagon. GPS, we couldn't have cell phones without Einstein. Well, the fact that radioactive isotopes, their decay rate changes when you change the environment they're in. Yeah, that's exactly something we already know. That you can change how fast something decays based on just putting it in a different environment. Put it with other radioactive isotopes and it decays much quicker. Lots of counter arguments to this bandwagon jumping nonsense, but no discipline. So anyway, we'll go back to this document and read some of it. And what else do we want to do? That's what we'll do first. These papers are all like 10, 15, 20 years old. These people might be dead for all I know. So, unfortunately. What are you going to do? All right. So, a couple of comments left by Metamorph. He's an old adversary, nihilist, okay, who cares somehow about something. Wrote a book on antinatalism that was just a self-indulgent narrative of his spectacularly failed, stupid, and retarded life as a religious kook and all kinds of things. He was a real bandwagon jumper on her. He loved to find some little fringe bandwagon playing some loop-de-doo, Dr. Seuss kind of tune. Anyway, go back and watch the first few minutes of this video, and perhaps it will be clear to you that all this toxic energy you produce is created by the momentum of your personal failures. So, first off, I don't even know what that means. I've had more failures than the average person. The fact is, I haven't had failures like you, okay? I haven't been a drug addict. I didn't do all these kind of things that you did, to spectacularly fail. So in some sense, I don't have too many personal failures. I don't have divorced wives and all that kind of stuff. I don't have a whole bunch of personal failures. I don't have herpes, Yeah, I'll point the finger. You probably do, right? And their subsequent kinetic envy. Okay, so whatever. Little word play there with the crap, because I used momentum arrows as a way of describing how weak physics evidence is. Little tiny arrows of evidence. Anyway, you need help, Professor. It would be, yes, I could use some help, but not the kind you think, okay? Because, look, the facts are going to indicate it. Eventually, these arguments will have to take place because, we're really not going to get to the spectacular future of any kind of being intelligent or smart if we believe in a bunch of superstitious nonsense. And clearly, this one is just so obvious. There is no magic extra energy. Fast things don't have extra energy. Newton wasn't wrong about this one. I don't think he was wrong about any of them, frankly, because he was kind of careful in what he said. So, and let's understand that's what this is all about. There's no, if you actually read the history, this is all about, an attack against Newton's physics. So, you can't pretend you're for Newton and against Newton. That's just, that's something you're used to doing. It's being a dualist. you want to, whatever. You've dug yourself a deep, deep hole. No, you've dug yourself one. Again, you're the one going to end up on the ash heap of, what an asshole. It's going to be, you could just paint it right on your gravestone now. What an asshole. You did all this shit talking and all this, what is this crap anyway? This isn't anything like an argument. You're not reasoning. You're not applying any logic. You're just spewing bullshit, nonsense, accusations. It's pathetic. Anyway, and every attempt to prove yourself worthy of the scientific endeavor, so more psychobabble, a deep hole with every attempt you make to prove yourself worthy of the scientific endeavor, I don't even know what that is just another shovel of shit dumped on your own head. So he thinks this is in some way, I would actually believe that. Like I have any reason whatsoever to believe that when every argument I've made from the beginning is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. They're not getting any weaker. The arguments are getting more glaring and more persuasive, and that's what's bothering you. So you have to ask the question, why all of this hyperbole? Why all this excessive rhetoric? What are these people afraid of? They're afraid that, oh, physics made some mistakes? Well, that's not good, right? Because they are kind of glaring. Okay, so it's really not good for the, it's really not good for the authority, of the talking heads when it's going to be shown that they made such glaring mistakes in their own conduct. And here they've been ridiculing all these other people for their bad conduct when, they were molesting just as many kids, so to speak, molesting the facts. They're fact molesters. Seriously, talk to somebody. Well, maybe I'll talk to the guy in the comments who thinks I'm doing very well. Yeah, so screw you. I've attempted conversation. Okay, I mean, Piro, I'm willing to talk. He's the one who can't have a conversation on the subject. He's the one that's got to keep changing it. So, you don't have an argument here. I'm not afraid to talk. I'm not afraid to talk in the sense that let's have the conversation, and I think it'll be really glaringly exposed that none of you people ever even thought about any of this stuff. You just did that. They preach the Bible to you, and you just accept it and accept it and accept it. Because that's all you do. You're sheep, and you do whatever the sheep master tells you, and maybe get on some meds. So, So, drugs were his life. They still are, and now he calls them meds. Yeah. Yeah. All right. You're teetering on the brink, dude. So he thinks he's going to persuade somebody with the old dude crap. I mean, somebody with any kind of male balls and any kind of maturity, that they really go for that dude shit. They just can't wait for somebody to call them a dude. Yeah, no, I'm afraid. See, I can't even imagine if somebody called my father dude. What kind of face he would have made. What? What'd you call me? Yeah. What? Hilarious. So this is a rather older man, who's still living in his little pothead smoke, and that's as far as he ever evolved. Light another doobie up, bro. It's just, what the fuck? It is mockable. Sorry, it's mockable. I mean, to take your little entertainment so seriously. All right. So it says, versus all of them. Yes, that was in the quotes. That's a quote from the title of the video. That's right. And, that's sort of the way it is. I mean, like I said, you can see these papers were just left to obscuria. The argument just doesn't take place. Because you're all just so comfortable living in the Borg, and that's sad. It's sad for you, that you're all so stupid. And you're living such fake and phony lives, all driven by Coke and Pepsi and Disney, and you're just complete suckers. Anyway, LOL. See, now this title is just so indicative of your delusional sense of personal grandeur. So exactly how is it inaccurate? So, I mean, would it really, so if it's me against, 7,493,642, and there's only 100,000 on my side, I can't say that that's basically an us and them in a dramatic way. Like all of them against, the tiny us. It really is. I mean, so as a fact, it's pretty glaring. But anyway, pretend, you go ahead and pretend it's, no, it's really, this is a real argument between, like somehow the fight is in any way fair. Okay. Gary, seriously, man, you are less than a fleck of dust on the lens. Yeah, and that's, again, to whose credit or failure will that be? So you don't deal with any of the arguments. You just put it off until somebody shows up who's going to be a club member. And the club members are going to start heckling you. And once that happens, then this truth will have to be ironed out. But it's going to have to happen, because I'm telling you, I'm sorry to inform you, but your physics has some gigantic holes in it. And it has some absolute silly nonsense in it. And you're going to have to fix it. And Einstein knew that. Do you think Einstein would be saying to you, yeah, way to go, metamorph, just keep arguing that somehow we've done it all and we've finished it all and it's all complete and it's all right, when he knew it wasn't? He wasn't happy. Going down the last few inches of his existence, he wasn't at all happy with where the physics had gone. To be brushed away the moment serious work begins. So he thinks you've done serious work. So the serious work is your religious icons. The serious work is polishing your totems, your totem poles. Your totem poles of waviness, and your totem pole now of the energy duality. And then you got your totem pole of entanglement and expansion, all the other horse shit you've made up. And they're just totem poles, and then you're just wasting time polishing totem poles. Tons of money spilled into LIGO for this fake, we heard two black holes crash into each other. I mean, I can ask the question over and over again, but do you really think you can convert matter into gravity? I mean, not some kind of energy, but gravity? Yeah, I don't think so. They aren't versus you. Yeah, well, so far, that's right. Even though I'm offering to pay them to be versus me. So, I mean, maybe sooner or later we'll hit a number, I suppose, that'll ring the bell, and they'll have to show up, okay? So we're at $2,000 now for them to make a counter argument. $2,000. And they won't make one. They won't take the challenge. The contenders showing up with money. It's like a millionaire, shows up and says to the fighting establishment, the boxing establishment, no, you don't have to pay me. I'll pay you, okay? So I'll put up the prize money. Box me, chicken. So he's going to Muhammad Ali and he's saying, look, you want to make some free money? Okay, I'll give you the prize money, all of it, okay, for you to beat me up. And they're not showing up. Now, does that mean that maybe they're afraid? Yeah, I think that's what... I think the whole little conspiracy cat, little baldy cats in his little bullshit runaway game demonstrates they're afraid. Okay, clearly they don't have an argument because they don't have facts on their side. All they have is, well, I jumped on the bandwagon. I don't really know why I'm on it. I don't know how they play their instruments. I don't know that much about it, really. They have hot dogs. I like hot dogs. You haven't ever produced anything worth even their barest attention. Well, except an argument. Okay, I've produced the argument that seems kind of glaring. I mean, 400 times better resolution from space, and you can't do a $50 experiment? Get back in your own lane, whatever, which in your case is that yucky Gary After Dark solitary pervest that you do. So whatever my personal interests are, I don't know exactly why they're important, and you're the one who put it all in a book. A completely self-indulgent bullshit book, okay, that's supposed to be on a subject, but it doesn't even say anything about the subject, actually. It's supposed to just imply the subject, but it never says anything about the subject. And you're criticizing other people's content. Kind of amazing. Anyway, it does matter what the spring is attached to. So this is Jerry Hall. And no, it just matters whether it's attached. But other than that, it doesn't matter. If it's attached to a wall, it is also attached to who doesn't know that, Jerry? But as the point was made, do you have a logical argument explaining how, wouldn't you see, if inertia mattered, that is the weight of the thing the spring was attached to, if it mattered, then how do you explain how there's no indication that it matters? That the experiments don't show that it matters? that if I double the mass of the thing it's attached to, it doesn't make any difference how much energy goes into the other object. So how do you explain that? Oh, that's right, you don't. Because you really don't understand that all you're really doing is moving the center of gravity of the spring, and you really can't change the fact that the center of gravity of the spring just moves depending on how heavy you make it. The heavier you make it, you just change the center of gravity of the spring, the center of its pressure. And that's all you're doing. So you're just moving it from as far out as possible with a light object to as close to the wall as possible with a heavy object. And that's all you're doing. You can't change how much energy it's going to be. You're just changing for every bit you put more pressure on one side, one irresistible, non-movable object, the spring just compensates for it by pushing more energy that way. Anyway, it's not, pushing more energy is the wrong way to say it. It just changes the center of the spring, which means the center from which the energy is going to be dispensed. All right. Where was I? Okay. Attached to the floor. It was also attached to the floor. The rest of the world, including yourself. Blah, 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 blah. Obviously, that doesn't really have anything to do with it. You don't need it to be, because the energy is going to be used up just moving molecules inside of the building. So it's not really going to go all that far. All right. I mean, I put a little tiny spring on the side of the Empire State Building and I tap it. That energy is going to be used up long before it gets to Times Square. But anyway, who cares? Momentum is conserved, so there's just more baby talk. We're talking about successfully transferring it. We're talking about momentum being a quantity, and you can't use it twice. If I move up, if I put a bowling pin in the middle of the bowling alley, right, not where the pins are, and I roll my bowling ball and I hit that pin, you got to know that your bowling ball has less momentum now, right, retard? I mean, I shouldn't have to reassert these points over and over and over again, because you don't address any of them. So every pin I move is using up the momentum energy. You do understand that, right? That I can't have the same momentum after I hit the pin than I had before I hit the pin. You do understand that I used it, don't you? Oh, fuck. But if the total momentum is spread across the world, it becomes impractical to use it for calculation. So this is more just absolute baby talk. Energy gets transferred through the world. They're both descriptions of energy, idiot. And the energy is the same, whether you call it momentum or you call it kinetic energy. It has absolutely nothing to do with following it through the environment. So of course it's hard to follow. That's the nature of physics, okay? Is that it's little tiny stuff moving. Okay, and so all we can do is write up some generalizations about, well, we'll lose 3% to heat, and we'll lose 3% to vibrations, and we'll use, we can calculate those things, and we can even understand them rather completely. Now, this argument doesn't have anything to do with anything like there's some new physics here. No, the same rules apply, but we know we have methods to see it. We can actually find it. We can actually photograph the bullet flying through space and know exactly how fast it's going. All right? We have methods to know answers. So this is just more crap that somehow the kinetic energy formula makes it easier. It's fake energy, idiot. I mean, I guess there's no point. It only makes sense if we have isolated systems. Oh, duh. I mean, again, they'll never counter-argue any of the points made. I made the point that they're all transfers, okay? You don't lose the energy, you transfer it to other objects. Like if I put a pin right in the middle of the lane of the bowling alley. I put a pin, and it has to hit that pin and then hit the other 10 pins. All right? I'm giving you an example that's just overt and explaining that that's the system rules. The system rules is you have to count every pin you hit. You have to count everything that moves because of the momentum you introduced into the system. You have a capacity to move objects, and the argument is your kinetic energy formula says the light thing going fast has more capacity to move objects. And the momentum argument, the Newton physics, says no. Okay, it only depends on mass and velocity. Mass carries the motion energy, and you have to have the mass for the energy to mean anything. Your velocity can't mean much if you don't have any mass. All right, isolate like 2 carts. It only takes It only makes sense if we have isolated system like two carts. Even isolated systems, as we know, are not completely isolated. There is atmospheric fog it has to plow through. There's lots of places where you're just not going to be able to get perfect. But you don't need perfect to know half the energy didn't disappear. Oh, this is just such a stupid conversation. I just can't believe this has to be explained. You really think 99% of the bullet's energy disappeared as heat? Do you think that ever happens? Ever? Yeah, ever. That there's ever been an experiment in the history of mankind where they got the bullet to turn 99% into heat. Nothing else, just heat. Yeah, I don't think so. Lewin didn't use the flame as a gimmick. I'm saying, of course, he did. He just think so. So this idiot's going to argue that there's a great idea. You want to cut a string, you cut it with a flame. No, you just take a scissor cut, a little tiny thread. You cut it. It's over in a gazillionth of a second. The flame is doing what? Oh, it's introducing heat. You don't think heat changes the spring constant? Oh, let's see. I might have heard that somewhere, like in a physics class. Okay, that if you heat a spring, you change the constant. You change its ability to absorb energy. So just brilliant of you. Let's throw a big flame right next to the spring that we're using to do a controlled experiment. That's probably not a great idea. Anyway, he didn't want to cut the rubber band with, it's not a rubber band, idiot. Okay, so you don't even understand how the damn experiment was performed. I mean, even though I played the video of it, it's a spring, okay, a piece of tense plastic or whatever it was made out of. It's a bow, essentially. All right, so it was a bow held with a wire, okay, and he cut the wire, the thread. All right, anyway, in your thought see, I mean, this minutia is just so fucking uninteresting. I mean, to sit there and, to make an argument based on that crap in this atmosphere, right? We're arguing a subject of your bold contention that things going faster have much more energy than slower things. That somehow velocity makes much more, it matters much more how fast something's going, and how heavy it is doesn't make much difference. Anyway, in your thought experiment, you removed one cart and replaced it with another. Yes. And then he says something idiotic, which is exactly what Lewin tried to avoid. Why would you avoid it? It's a very good way to collect the energy, because springs are really constant, like floor scales. He was talked about doing the experiment with a scale and throwing things at the scale. Well, why would he want the scale to be moving? Don't you think you'd get a different answer if the scale's moving? Yeah, I think you would. You don't want that. Which is exactly what Lewin tried to avoid. So it's just so stupid. Interfering with the experiment. No, that's called doing the experiment. You can't, you have to collect energy before you can measure how much energy something had. You have to collect it. I can't just watch it and say, oh, that's how much energy it has. We'll say in the case of the bullet, I can do half that, right? I can certainly watch its velocity, with high-speed cameras. And so, but I can't watch its mass. I have to measure it. All right. If you put your hands in there and move things around, you have changed the momentum and included yourself in the experiment. So he's saying that we don't have, in his own experiment, right, where he's doing the ballistic pendulum thing, he's obviously has a mechanical device that's measuring how far the thing moved, right? So how exactly is the ballistic a pendulum any different than a spring on a wall? It's no different at all. I mean, you're using the ballistic pendulum's obviously using gravity. It's not using a spring, but it's the same exact experiment, idiot. And you're still going to have a locking mechanism or some mechanism to measure how absolutely far the spring was compressed. So I could put the same slider on a spring and just measure how far you compress the spring, and it'll tell me. Certainly, if something goes exactly the same distance on the spring, that would certainly mean it had the same energy. I don't even think you're dumb enough to disagree with that. But I'm saying you already know all of these answers intuitive. You already know them from your own life experience. You throw 1 pound into the air and catch it, and then you throw 2 pounds into the air and catch it. You can tell the difference, but you don't have some idea that light things have more energy than heavy things. There's no indication of any rule like that. No indication at all that the two experiences aren't completely consistent. Yes, the heavy thing is harder to push. Yeah, I mean, it makes complete sense. There's no, it came back down. The light thing came back down. It felt like it felt like the 2 pound thing. Now it's not going to feel like the 2 pound thing. If you put your hands, okay, you already did that. But it wouldn't make any difference since the wall and the world is already included. So so he just doesn't want to pay any attention to the experiment. So you literally have to do it, right? Which I don't mind, but I'm just saying it's such a mundane experiment, no one's done it. But I mean, so we have the experiment that has a 1 pound thing and a 1 pound thing. And we find out this one leaves at a certain speed. And then we have 1 pound thing and 2 pound thing. And this thing leaves at exactly the same speed. And what he wants me to do is do the 10 pound and then the million pound. Just to prove the case that this always leaves at the same speed. We already have a huge indication that that's the truth. And he has a counter theory that that's not the truth. That it does somehow make a difference whether I have something of 1,000,000 times the weight. That somehow it's going to make a difference. That this, all of a sudden, the facts are going to change. And there's going to be some place where all of a sudden now the energy is going to change. So he has the extraordinary claim. I mean, the claim outside the evidence. And yet he won't produce the experiment. He won't produce the evidence of his theory. So he's disagreeing with Professor Lewin, and yet he's writing a comment to me as if I need to answer something. No, you need to answer it. And why don't you go ask Professor Lewin to redo the experiment, because he's cheating. He's cheating the facts by implying that it doesn't matter what weight I put on the other side. I always get this on this side. This side can only do this much. It can't do anything else. The same spring compression is always going to produce the same energy in both directions, and you can't change it. And that's just the way it is. You think differently. Well, why don't you challenge Professor Lewin to provide you evidence? So anyway, momentum and kinetic energy are not opposed to each other. So this is just, how the fuck can you say something so fucking stupid? Two completely different answers for something called energy. And let's not pretend there's no way you could misunderstand the history enough not to think it's a definition of energy. It's a definition of energy. The Newtonian physics is completely based on it. It's completely based on where things can go in space. Is based on their velocity and their mass. That's their energy. How much other molecules they can move. Momentum was always a description of energy. So what does this even mean? They're not opposed to each other. Completely different descriptions. All right? And their whole history was made out of one being right and one being wrong. The whole argument was about which one is right and which one is wrong. And here you say they're somehow compatible. It's okay. 2 plus 2 equals 3. 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's okay. What's the problem? They're completely compatible answers. Again, on this page, the one I'm going to read through, it has a little bit of the abstract on rocket engines, I think. Maybe that was the other one. Well, it doesn't matter. And the fact is if you use if you use one theory and use another theory, your rockets will either succeed or crash. There's both of them can't work, because both of them, one of them tells you to keep the throttle on your rocket 10 seconds, and the other one says only 7 seconds. You can't use both of them and win. You're going to fail using one of them. Anyway. If I multiply the kinetic energy formula with m over m, well, what the fuck would I do that? I get E. So he's just doing this again. Rewrite the same equation by saying P. P is just m times V. So what have you accomplished? Nothing. Just cross out one of the m's. I mean, it's just too stupid. You haven't changed it. This isn't a different formula. It's exactly the same formula, just rewritten where you hid the M and the V. Oh, fucking A. So I can use this as well to calculate energy. It's not the momentum form. Because momentum is in the formula, it doesn't mean it's the momentum formula. Obviously, momentum equals mass times velocity. Okay, E equals mass times velocity. There, done. E equals P. You could just say that and you're done. That's the truth. E equals P. You're all done. All of this extra crap is your extra crap. Okay, that's the kinetic energy formula. Those are the competing understandings. One of them just says E equals P. Yours says E equals P times P squared divided by 2m, which is exactly the same as 1/2 mv squared. They get the two will get the same answer. But this is not an energy equation for momentum. Obviously, momentum has got a whole bunch of extra crap tied to it. How could this be the same as momentum, retard? I mean, really, retard. So I can use this as well to calculate energy. You're doing exactly the same calculation. Oh, isn't that so impressive? You rewrote the same formula in a different form and said, look, look at what? It's the same formula. It's not momentum. It's not the formula for momentum. Anyway, I'll take a break. That hurt. That was so dumb. Ugh. All right, let's see if the rocket stuff is at the end of this document. Yeah, there it is. So the two will tell you different answers, right? This one says 350 seconds. This one says 612 seconds for exactly the same circumstance. So I used the kinetic energy formula and the momentum formula, and my rockets will be doing completely different things. Because it is a different universe. It's a completely different universe the two formulas are describing. It's a completely different way of looking at the universe. And you can't deny that. And the duality isn't correct. Momentum is either entirely wrong, right? And kinetic energy is entirely right, or vice versa. There's this duality is an absolute nonsense. I shouldn't even have to say that, but you people are so used to living in these fake worlds of these fake concepts. And, I don't even know what to say to that. It's so fucking dumb. You really think it's possible that both can coexist with each other? That momentum can have any meaning in a world where you say that lighter things have more magical energy? Yeah, it can't. That can't mean anything to anybody rational. All right, I'm back, I think. Okay, anyway. So this is something in the General Science Journal, the wrong kinetic energy. So, research paper, blah, blah, blah. Person in Hawaii who knows how long ago it was written, and such. So anyway, the abstract. There is a difference between kinetic energy and field energy in modern physics, and the field energy. Who knows, like I said, why we would bother. I'm just saying momentum was always the right answer. As I'm just describing, it's always about momentum. Whether it's an electron, a proton, an atom, it's all momentum. It's all based on your motion. Now, the difference between the motion between electrons and protons and actual atoms, that's a little bit complicated. But anyway, a situation that was troubling to Albert Einstein. I think it has to be understood that, yes, the mechanisms that are moving whole atoms and the mechanisms that move the individual electrons and protons might have a subtle difference to them. Okay, because one is a system and the other one is more elemental in terms of the elemental functions. But the bottom line is that we can sort of say that whatever goes in comes out, kind of a thing. I don't know how else to say it. It's conserved anyway. All right, kinetic energy has its roots in the metaphysical thinking of Gottfried Leibniz. So it started with Leibniz, but it really started with Huygens. But Huygens was saying it for a different reason, as I understand. So it was Leibniz who first proposed this as a replacement for momentum. All right, whose mv squared formula. So let's understand, for 100 years the formula was mv squared, which you would have to admit was at least 100% off. It was a huge exaggeration of the amount of energy, because they had to correct it with the 1/2 much later. So this didn't have a good origin. And the fact that these people won't even admit this origin is ugly. The origin of this formula is essentially just pseudoscience on its face. It's just superstitious nonsense in a sense, and it's so inaccurate. and yet they're so convinced this is the truth. I mean, bad on you is all I can say. I mean, that's just bad on you. You can't even admit that this might be doubtable, that this might be something bad that got, a bad bit of worm that, ate its way into physics. All right, has been confirmed by Emily de Chartelet, who contradicted Sir Isaac Newton and her contemporary French physicists. So let's understand, it was clearly a controversy, and it was clearly an assertion that Newton was incorrect. Beyond the metaphysical origins, the classical formula of kinetic energy has critical errors in its reduction. So he's arguing that this game they played much later to, in sense, try to derive Newton mechanics into Leibniz mechanics. So they're trying to turn Newton into an advocate for Leibniz, trying to force to put Leibniz science in Newton science. I mean, it's really a nasty thing to do. It's just as bad as them saying Einstein was for gravitational wave detectors and Einstein was for entanglement. Yeah, no, that's just lying. The controversial origins of the questionable mathematical reduction of our concept of kinetic energy demand a serious reevaluation of our natural philosophy regarding energy by motion. I don't like this natural philosophy word at all. That just sounds like you're trying to hide religion in science. So I wouldn't even mess with that nonsense. Okay, there's logic and there's facts. So let's call it factologicaling. Let's call it something else. But natural philosophy, that just sounds like you're playing a game with words. Okay, the wrong kinetic energy. Introduction. Late in life, Albert Einstein made an intriguing observation about the difference between field energy and kinetic energy. He wrote, so again, as I have asserted, the old Einstein was a lot different than the young Einstein. Kinetic energy and field energy appear as essentially different things. So he's arguing momentum and kinetic energy. It appears all the more unsatisfactory as, according to Maxwell's theory, the magnetic field of a moving electric charge represents inertia. So in a sense, they're behaving just as if momentum was the only thing that mattered. So they're behaving as if momentum was driving their movement. Why not then the whole of inertia? So I don't know exactly what that means. Why not then the whole of inertia? So in all places it should be the same. Then only field energy would be left. So the only thing you'd be using is just momentum. And the particle would be merely a domain containing an especially high density of field energy. It would be containing mass moving. Yeah. In that case, one could hope to deduce a concept of mass point together with the equations of motion of the particles from the field equations. So I don't know exactly. The field equations, again, are just places and distances. But clearly he's arguing there should be consistency here. And so he says the disturbing dualism would have been removed. So if you didn't bother with this kinetic energy formula, you get rid of this dualism, and that's a really good idea. All right, so he says here, kinetic energy is relatively a new term. Before 1849, it was called quality of motion. So, so that's sort of the trick, tricks of words, right? They invented kinetic energy. And so they applied the word energy to the kinetic thing, but you could always have said momentum energy. Would have worked just as well, because it is a description of energy. Back then, there were actually two different qualities of motion in use. One British by Sir Isaac Newton, one German by Gottfried Leibniz. So clearly there was a controversy, clearly there was an argument. Clearly there wasn't a scientific argument, okay? This didn't happen in the British institution. It only happened in France, theoretically. I mean, pretty much the argument took place in the French scientific establishment. It didn't take place in the British scientific establishment, because clearly Newton would have won there. That has been confirmed by one French courtesan named Emily de Charlotte or whatever, who was mentored by her lover and genius of mockery, Voltaire himself. So Voltaire, on this subject, was completely opposed to her assertion of Leibniz physics. And apparently he has a quote, though, late in Voltaire's life, I suppose, or late in the controversy, where, at least in a private letter, Voltaire conceded, which is kind of sad. So apparently everybody just gave up and said, okay, I'll climb on the bandwagon. Today in our natural philosophy, the same two elements, mass and velocity, are producing two very different quantities in moving bodies, momentum and kinetic energy. That is counterintuitive. One might even call it absurd. Well, clearly it's absurd, in my opinion. It's clearly not. They both can't be correct or the spaceship crashes. That's the fact. So there's no way to get out of it. Okay? There's no way to get around the fact that lighter things go 4 times higher in gravity has absolutely nothing to do with when they hit the ground. We know they're not going to have 4 times the energy when they hit the ground. So why are we having this conversation? Yes, the same energy can move light things faster. That's it. Lighter things go faster. Okay? But they don't have more energy. They won't compress a spring more. They won't show that fastness has anything to do with how much energy they have, how much capacity to move elemental bits, how many pins they can knock down. It has nothing to do with it. Anyway. So, I mean, I've already made the arguments, but here you can just see that there's a similar history being cited here. All right, the two qualities of motion. The evolution of the above qualities of motion include the theories of Sir Isaac Newton and Leibniz, a bitter argument during the 1840s, the time of Joule, among others. The 1/2 coefficient was introduced and added to Leibniz formula. Then the qualities were renamed as momentum and kinetic energy. All right, so the quality of motion, you could just said, was the energy of an object. That's what they're really describing. And they decided to call Newton's theory momentum, and they called Leibniz theory kinetic energy. And then they tried to say that somehow these are compatible, or that Newton's physics could be used to derive Leibniz physics. And that's where it all goes really south. And so he has some explanation of the mathematical error. I've already kind of stated it is there's just no such thing as a quantity of acceleration. So as soon as you have an F equals ma, you're already in trouble, in a sense, because there's the value of the mass is real. This idea of what acceleration is just velocity. So Newton's formula is really just saying mass times your new velocity. And instead, they've somehow figured out some wacky reason to square the velocity. Multiply it twice in the equation. VMV. Why would you do that? When you know velocity is just important to energy as the mass is. You know it. I'm just saying you personally know that the mass of the object is just as important as the velocity. You know it from your life experience, that how heavy it is. If I make a baseball twice as heavy and I throw them at the same speed, you'd know, oh shit, the heavy one's going to hurt a lot more. When you know these things. So why this, you're confused, you don't get that that's how it works, that the mass is just as important, Anyway, I'm just surprised that really does have to be an argument. So we have more blah 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 quotes from the past, this and that. So it says here, Emily believed that Newton's calculation was wrong. In her writing, she sided with the metaphysics of Leibniz and stated that mv squared was the correct quantity of motion. So let's understand, it was mv squared back then. It was 100% wrong. Even if kinetic energy is real, even if the 1/2 mv squared equation is correct now, it was 100% wrong then. So, and you're saying it won the argument. So there was an argument between two formulas, and one of them already was giving you an answer that was way out of whack. Okay, I mean twice as the number should be 50, it was saying 100. So it was already hugely out of whack. And somehow that side won, when momentum has never been proven to be dysfunctional. Newton was famous because momentum works. That's why Newton's famous, is because he figured out the motion of everything in the universe based on this momentum theory. Everything. I mean, he predicted when the whatever you call those little things with tails, cosmos. That's not the right answer. Comets. He predicted when comets would show up. He predicted all kinds of stuff, and he didn't use this wacky formula. He used the one that works. I don't know. And yet I will be ridiculed for just pointing out how does that make sense to you people? There's a contest between two formulas, and we already know as a historical fact that one of them was 50% wrong. I mean, 100% wrong, really. It was half. It had exaggerated it by a full portion. Wrong. Incredibly wrong. I mean, if so wrong that can you imagine if I doubled your salary? You go to work and now tomorrow I'm going to double your salary. It's a huge amount of difference in your life, right? Huge difference in your life. Not a little difference. Huge difference wrong. And yet somehow that side won. That just proves how bad the argument must have been. That proves just how bad their ability to know the truth was. How foggy all of this had to be. That's a formula that overtly that wrong could somehow win the argument. So, and you won't concede that maybe we should revisit this conversation? Maybe we should go through the evidence and see whether there was any evidence on their side? I'm arguing it's almost none. Okay, they have clay experiments and nothing else. And if they had done the clay experiments a little bit differently, they already knew that even though the lighter ball, the one with the higher velocity dropped in gravity, the same weight, the one that fell further in gravity to double its velocity, and it goes 4 times deeper in the clay. They know that if they did that experiment in something other than clay, they would have got a different answer. So we know their experimental evidence for this mv squared is horrible. Absolutely horrible. And I've shown you now some of it. I've shown you that momentum with the little carts and the springs gets the right answers. I've shown you. And that the mv squared thing can make no sense at all. None. You don't have twice the energy in the train going 10, you can't, the 10 mile an hour 5-ton train does not have more energy than the 5 mile an hour 10-ton train. Come on, you've got to know that's true. They have the same capacity to knock over pins. Well, is there any point? I mean, people are just... Again, the bowling example is sort of one that you're just saying, why wouldn't professional bowlers use lighter bowling balls? If lighter bowling balls had more energy, right? If throwing light things fast was more energetic than throwing big things slow, why would professional bowlers be using the heaviest ball they can legally use? You gotta ask the question. Like I said, I gave you a couple of reasons why maybe, it's an advantage, but would it be enough of an advantage to overcome the fact that you're supposed to have twice as much energy in the lighter object? I mean, it's twice as much energy. The 8-pound ball versus the 16-pound ball. We can just turn this into a train example. The small one would have twice as much energy by your kinetic energy formula. Twice as much energy. And yet somehow they're choosing the heavier ball. Come on. But no, we can't even talk about it. Even to bring it up means I'm a fucking asshole. I mean, you people suck. You suck so deep. All the way down to your little scurvy lima bean balls. You are just such nasty pieces of shit. Anyway. So, clearly other people have figured out that this formula is a piece of steaming shit. And no one paid any attention, and blah, 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 blah. So there's not much I can do. I can just say that, I will attempt to pay them to pay attention. I'll do what I can for the cause. But apparently physics is belligerently stupid. They want to stay good and dumb. and all the little physics trolls and all the little physics bandwagon jumping, all the people in the physics club somehow are all excited to be part of something really, really stupid. Yeah, that's all that can be said. Why are you defending this terrible physics? It's terrible physics. Admit it. Grow up. Be mature. Ugh. Anyway, so that's enough. So the other guy's paper was on, like I said, this guy cited he showed a couple of people he attempted to make fun of. So yeah, there's lots of tinfoil hatters out there to make fun of. But that doesn't mean every argument's a piece of shit. And it's just, but they just pretend they all suck for some reason. But they really don't address any of the arguments. Like this guy did write a decent enough paper, got lots of data in it, and this guy just pretends he doesn't have to read any of that and pay any attention to the actual argument made. Because he doesn't have a counter argument defending mv squared beyond just saying it's well established. Look, criticize established physics. Established by what? Where's your list of experiments showing that the bowling ball, the 8-pound bowling ball, has twice as much energy as the 16-pound bowling ball? Where's your extensive evidence showing me that? Oh, that's right, you don't have any. Yeah. You don't care. You don't care that your physics is unevidenced and it's just a religion. You don't care. That's the simple answer. It's a religion. Okay. Yeah, that's enough. I can only do my job. I did my job. And I will move on to the next job. Job. I will continue to endeavor to persevere against your very lame slings and arrows, I must say. Very lame. You haven't hit anything close to a vital organ. Yeah, no. Not even close. Pussies just throwing boogers. You just, it's all you got. Till the next time, and such and so forth. This has been a DraftScience video presentation and such.